Hey QED coders, this is Michael. Actually, I'm not sure why I'm wearing the headphones because this is a solo stream. I have some really exciting stuff to share with you about the Replicator as a service. First of all, let me check the audio levels. Yes, I can see them pinging. I had some audio problems yesterday, so that's why we didn't have a stream yesterday with Jan. But Jan and I had a really good conversation. He's seen the demo I'm about to show you here, and you cannot see me talking to you. Oh my goodness! There we go. Now you can see me talking to you. Okay. Yeah, maybe I should just start over with this stuff. I don't know. Such an amateur. Anyway, it's actually 7:30 right now, so. Hey QE Decoders, this is Michael. Alright, some really exciting stuff to share with the Replicator as a service. Replicator as a service is a solution for you to be able to use as a front-end application developer. And the idea is that you're busy building your web application, your mobile application, using whatever stack you like. In JavaScript or in .NET, and you don't want to write the backend. You don't want to write the database. You don't want to write the API. You don't want to write authentication, authorization code, none of that. You want somebody else to take care of that for you. And that's what the Replicator as a service does. So, the exciting thing that I want to share with you today is that there is now a beta of Authenticate with Apple ID in the Replicator as a service at dev.janaga.com. So I'm going to walk you through that right now if I can find the right scene. And yeah, I believe that's the right one. Okay. We are looking at dev.janaga.com and we are seeing the replicators that I have set up. So I've got a replicator for the blog application, got a replicator for the Festify application. Both of those are in the dev environment. Now I want to start Monster Hotel. I'm going to build this React Native application, and it's going to be a lot of fun, and it's got pictures of monsters that are on vacation. So let's go ahead and create a new replicator, call it Monster Hotel. It is in the development environment. I'm not yet going to create the test or production replicator. Let's just do this one in development. So already we've got ourselves a replicator with a URL that if I were to hit publish, this is now my backend. I can point the Janaga.js or Janaga.net libraries at this backend, and I would be able to save and read facts from that backend. So all of that is great, but the problem is I am not authenticated with that backend as an end user. So that means that anybody could write any fact, and then anybody could just read anything in that application. Basically, that is an open database on the internet as soon as I hit publish. But I'm not going to hit publish because we don't want to open up that database to all sorts of abuse yet. So the first thing that I want to do is lock it down to certain users. I need to know who those users are. So I'm going to hit the fabulous button. That's a floating action button in React MUI, Material UI. Yeah. So we can add a few different kinds of cards. I'm going to add an authentication card. So in order to set up this authentication card, I need to set up sign in with Apple. That's the first authentication provider that I am supporting. So the idea is you're an application developer. You're going to release Monster Hotel on the iPhone, and so you have a subscription to the Apple Developer Program. You're already paying your $99 a year for that. You want your users to be able to sign in to your application. This is what you need to do in order to get that set up. So we are going to come up with an app description, bundle ID, service description, service identifier, and key name. And we're going to fill all of these things in. So let's just take a stab at what values we want here, and we will plan out our work inside of this little workspace. And then it's going to walk us through looking up our team ID, registering the app ID and the service ID, and creating a key. So it's going to help us with all that on this Apple developer site. So this is Replicator as a service, helping us out as an Apple developer. Just making sure that the stream is live. It is. All right. Okay. Good. I'm a little bit nervous about things don't work out, but I think it's working this time. Okay. So the app description is Monster Hotel. The bundle ID, we want to be of the form a reverse domain name. So I'm going to use the qedcode.com domain name, and then I'm going to have Monster Hotel as the application name. And so that sets up our app bundle ID. It also gives us a recommendation for the service identifier. So I'll go ahead and take that recommendation. It's giving also recommendations for the service description and the key name. Now, as we'll see in a little bit, the recommendation that it's generating for the service description is not ideal, so I'm going to be changing that. But let's see how this works right now. So we're all set. We've got our work planned ahead of us. So let's hit next, and now we need to look up our team ID. So go to your Apple developer account. You can do that by just clicking on the little link right here, and now I am logged in as an Apple developer. And you scroll on down to the membership details, like it shows here, and you grab your team ID. That's my team ID. And paste that right in. Okay, now, next step. We need to register an app ID. So we go to identifiers. We could click the link. I already happen to be there. So here's identifiers. We can set up app IDs or service IDs. I've cleared things out a little bit, so we're just down to the app ID for the one app that I have published under this account, which was in 2014. Funny thing, I just received an email from Apple saying, you know what, we're going to take this out of the store unless you update it, because, you know, it's 2014 was a long time ago. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. So I am going to be taking that application down. But not before I set up Monster Hotel. So let's register a new identifier. We hit the little plus button, and then we register an app ID, and we choose an app, not an app clip. And now we need to type in our description and our bundle ID. Now, fortunately, we already did that work ahead of time, so we know what our description shall be. Paste that in. And we know what our bundle ID is going to be, so paste that in. And now before we continue, let's look at the instructions. It says under capabilities, check the box next to sign in with Apple. All the way down here, lots of capabilities I can choose for my application, but sign in with Apple is the one that I want to set up right now. So this is enabled as a primary app ID. That's all we need to do. We do not need to click edit. And then we continue and register. So continue. It gives us a little warning right here at the top telling us what we're about to do. The next steps that we need to do. Janaga's already got that, so don't worry too much about it. Register. Okay. We have our Monster Hotel app ID. So what's next? Next, we need to register a service ID. Okay, so same screen. Let me slide this over here so I'm not skipping. In fact, I don't even need that tab anymore. So let's hit the plus, and now we're going to get a service ID. Continue. We need the description and the identifier. So what was the description and identifier we came up with? Well, this one. And this one. Now, notice that the description of the service is authenticate users for Monster Hotel. That is going to come up as a problem, but I'll let it be a problem so you can see what the problem is, and then I'll make the fix before the next time we see this. So I've got my description and my identifier, and so the next thing is continue and register, select the service from the list, and edit it again. That way I get this. So remember what the screen looks like. Continue and register, and now we come back to that screen and it's got new controls on it. Okay, so now we can sign in with Apple. Let's enable that and configure it. What's our configuration? Enable it, configure it, then the primary app ID is already selected by default. That's actually not true. It happens to be true in this case because I only have one app ID. But I'm going to have to change the instructions to show that you will have to make sure that you select your primary app ID. But then we need our domains and subdomains, and we need our return URLs. Well, these are the values that we want to use. So the domain is repdev.janaga.com. That is the domain for the Replicator as a Service Development Edition. So this is just in beta. And then the return URLs. Here we've got repdev.janaga.com, and then this is the ID of our replicator, then /auth/apple/callback. So when we sign in with Apple, Apple is going to redirect back to the Replicator as a service, not back to our application. And the Replicator as a service is going to complete the handshake from there. So we've copied that return URL, pasted it in there, and we are all good. Okay, so there's our primary bundle ID, there's the website URLs. We're done. And we continue. And we save. All right. Okay, so next, done, continue, save. Now, what's next? One more step. We need to create a key. So we go to the keys section. Again, we've got a link directly to it, or it's right here, keys. And I've deleted all of my keys. Didn't need a key before with Dallas Tech Fest because you didn't sign into Dallas Tech Fest. It was just an information app. But now we are going to create a key. So we are going to give it the key name, signing key for Monster Hotel. Let's copy that, hit plus, and paste in that key name. Now, what kind of services do we need to enable for this key? Well, you can probably guess. Or you can read the instructions here. Check sign in with Apple, and then configure. And in fact, there's a little picture of it, just in case you need a little bit extra help, because sometimes you just do. So we're going to configure the key. Select our primary ID. For some reason on the other screen it selected one by default. On this screen it doesn't. Probably best not to if I were to make the choice. So you don't just accidentally assume that the one that's selected is going to be the correct one. So you select your primary app ID, and then you've got this grouped app ID thing that shows up. Don't need to do anything with that. We need to save. And now that we are here, we need to continue. Tells us all about what we're about to do. And then we can register. And that's where we see our key ID. So let's copy that key ID. And Replicator as a Service needs to know that key ID. It also needs to know about the key. So let's choose that key file. Oh, I haven't downloaded it yet. Let's download it first. Download the key. There it is. Auth key, PVPR. PVPR is the key ID, so it helps us to keep track of things. here's the auth key, PVPR, in my downloads folder. Select that, and it's uploading. And what it's doing at this point is it is storing that P8 file, that RSA private key. It's storing that in Azure Key Vault. And so that way, the key itself is not kept inside of the Janaga data model. There's no way for you to use Janaga to retrieve the actual private key. It's stored in a key vault. The Replicator as a Service portal application has permission to write to that key vault, but not to read from it. So even if you were to attack this application right here, you couldn't read it out. The application that can read that key vault is the one that's doing the handshake with Apple. That's the actual Replicator backend. So we have gone through the process. We have set up let's see it done. We have set up a key. We have set up an app ID. We have set up a service ID. All these things are connected to one another. So all these moving parts in Apple kind of guided us through getting all of those wibbly wobbly pieces and hooking them back together. And we've collected the information that we need in order to use that machine and put that into the Replicator as a Service. So let's finish. And then what it does is it generates for us a card. You can see Authenticate with Apple is now available as a card in our Replicator. So that means we can take all of this information and we can use it in order to configure a client. Now, the very first client that I want you to try out is Postman. So let's grab some Postman. I'm going to go over here, start up Postman. Okay. And what I just set up was the Monster Hotel Replicator as a Service. So let's go to the Monster Hotel Replicator. And I want to set up the authorization for Monster Hotel. Now, at some point, I will have a little instructions for Postman link right here, so you will be able to see all of these instructions, and it'll help you walk through. And then we'll take all of these values and stick them into the instructions, the same way we saw in the walkthrough to create this card, so that you can follow along and you can do things step by step. But while you're here, here's the information you need. All right, so we're going to set up authorization. The type of authorization we want to use is OAuth 2. Now, it doesn't matter what service we've authenticated with. In this case, we're authenticating using Apple ID. In the future, we'll be able to authenticate using Google or Microsoft or Azure B2C or maybe Auth0, FusionAuth. Check out FusionAuth. It's pretty cool. That's going to be on there as well at some point. But it doesn't matter which service you use. You will always choose OAuth 2 because the thing that you're authenticating with is the Replicator as a Service. Replicator as a Service is then authenticating with that downstream provider. And then it's going to take that provider's identity and that token and turn that into a Replicator token that is useful for creating facts and querying facts and subscribing to the Replicator. So it's always auth 2, OAuth 2.0, and then we want to set up our configuration. So here, the grant type that we always will choose is authorization code with Pixie. Every single time. And that's because with Replicator as a Service, you are writing a client application. Replicator as a Service is playing the part of the server in your application. And so you are shipping a client, and the the user can see the entire source code of that client. Whether you ship it on an iPhone or you ship it to a CDN as a web application, a user can download that entire application, all of its configuration. They can see all of this stuff. So we want to make sure that there aren't any secrets in here. The only thing that you can do with this stuff is figure out how to log in as a user, which is precisely what your application is letting the user do anyway. So we are going to capture all of this, and we are going to put it into these configuration slots, and none of these are going to be secret, so we're not populating the client secret. Because we don't have a server to keep track of the client secret for us, we have to use PKCE. That is a way for the client application to randomly come up with a challenge. It's a cryptographic challenge that if somebody were to introduce a man in the middle, they would not be able to satisfy that challenge. So this means that it's protecting against that man in the middle attack. It is not guaranteeing that this client is owned by the person who set up this these authentication rules. Authorization code, not using PKCE, would instead use a client secret. That client secret has to be stored on a server, and then the application developer owns that server, and you're proving that it's only the application developer that can do that. Well, why not store the client secret in Replicator as a service if it's acting as our server? Well, the thing is, Replicator as a service is not your application. It's running on a completely different domain. It is not owned by you. It is owned by Janaga LLC, and so you want to think about that as a service provided to your application. Your application is now providing a front end to that service. The way that I really like to think about it is that users themselves are just accessing the Replicator as a service, and your application is providing a nice convenient way for them to do that. It's giving them all the instructions for how to log into it, what kind of facts can you create, what kind of specifications can you run to get facts back. So these are all instructions that are bundled up and shipped with your application. You cannot include secrets within that bundle because then they wouldn't be secret. So that's kind of the way to think about it. And so we always use authentication code with PKCE. That was a long description of just one field. Let's run through the others. I'm going to copy the callback URL. You'll notice that this is just some callback URL that I, Michael Perry, have made up for you. That's because this part is not finished yet. You will be able to give the callback URL that you are using for development, so it might not be localhost 8080, as well as the callback URLs that you are using with your deployed application. So there'll be a way for you to edit those. Those will be captured right here. But for right now, I just have it hard-coded to this one value. We've got our auth URL, so we'll copy that, paste that in there. You'll see the auth URL ends in auth apple, and that's because if we hit this particular auth URL, we're going to redirect to sign in with Apple. If you set up sign in with Google, sign in with Microsoft, sign in with B2C, you're going to get a different auth URL. So then the access token URL is what we use in order to retrieve the token, and no matter what service you're using, that's always auth token. So we've got that in there. And then we've got our client ID. So here we have generated a brand new client ID for you. No client secret, because you are building a completely client-side application. But then here is PKCE. The challenge method is SHA-256. So that means the random challenge that the client comes up with, it's going to use SHA-256, computer hash, and then you're going to have to satisfy that that you know about that challenge. Not entirely certain on the cryptographic functions that it's using in order to do that. Something like an HMAC SHA will make a little bit more sense. Maybe that's what that means under the covers. But you are going to, as a client application, come up with a code verifier. In Postman, you leave that blank, it will come up with a random one. And now the scope that we're looking for is profile. So that's the only scope that Replicator as a service currently supports. That's the only one that I foresee needing, because all of the application scope is really determined by your authentication and distribution rules, authorization distribution rules. But that's for another video. And then finally, state, an opaque value used for preventing cross-site request forgery. It's very similar to code verifier in that your web application or your mobile application should come up with a random one each time. But it's used in a different way. It's an older mechanism than PXE, but it's still used in parallel with PXE. It used to be that Postman would automatically generate state if you left it blank, if I remember correctly, but it doesn't do that anymore. So this is a question for all of you. The instructions that I give here are not intended to be specific to Postman, but here I need to tell you how to come up with random state specifically for Postman, and I don't want to confuse this and have you enter something like rand int. If I can type rand int into your React Native application, for example, because that would just be silly. It wouldn't work. Well, it would probably just use that state, because state is a string. It would use that same state every time, which actually opens you back up to these cross-site request forgery attacks. So, question to you, how do I express that here? Do I have something here that's specific to Postman? Do I leave this as generic? Have other instructions that are specific to Postman? Do I actually just give you a random number that you always use for Postman testing? That doesn't seem safe. So, in any case, we've got our authentication or authorization set up here. It's really doing authentication, but we call it the authorization tab because HTTP puts this bearer token in the authorization header somewhere in here. Add it to request headers. Yeah, somewhere in here it actually lets you select authorization header, or maybe it's just kind of assumed that's the one you're talking about. So now let's see if this works. We've gone through these steps in order to get things set up in the Replicator as a service. Let's see if we can authenticate. So we are starting, sign in with Apple. This is always such a tense moment. It always takes a long time the first time. I wonder if that's Apple getting things set up on their side. It's like, oh, okay, you configured it. Now you actually want to use it. Wow, okay, I didn't know that. Let me put my house in order. Okay, let me put these clothes away. All right. This place is such a mess. And then, oh, invalid client. Oh, no. Oh, no. What happened here? Well, let's do just a little bit of diagnostics. See what happened here. I got a 400 back from repdev.janaga.com. And so you can see this is the auth URL. Okay, so we're calling that auth URL, and we're doing /auth/apple right there. Response type is code. Client ID is this value that I put in here, the KJI something is the client ID. That's good. And then we did state, and we've got randint as the actual state. No, you were supposed to... I don't think this actually is what caused it, but let's just put a random int there. That's what it should have been, some random number. I don't think that's what actually caused it, though. Profile is the scope, as we set up. The redirect URI is the localhost thing that we set up here. The code challenge, here we've come up with some random base64 number, and then the code challenge method is SHA-256, as we selected here. So that's the request that goes to the Replicator as a service. Replicator as a service is saying that it doesn't know about that client ID. So the response headers, I don't know if you can actually see the response itself in here. That would be nice. Okay, well, let's see. Let's see if just changing that state has any effect. I don't think it will. But let's give it a try. Get a new access token now. Let's go to the browser, and now it immediately says invalid client. All right, so we have some diagnostics to do, some debugging. You know what? This looks like fun. We're going to spend a little bit of time on this, but if you were here for the announcement, that was the announcement. We've got sign in with Apple. We can configure it on the Replicator as a service, and one day soon it will actually work. Let's take a look at what happened in the portal. I'm going to just come over here just in case something flashes on the screen, and get signed into the Azure portal. And I'm going to go to, there we go. This is my application insights for the application that we were just working with. Okay. So we see some failed requests. Let's go ahead and start there. Most of these failed requests are 404s. This is the continual ping that we are getting to the root of the multi-tenant replicator. And so I need to set up that health check so that it doesn't just hit the root, because that root doesn't do anything. Or maybe I'll just turn root into the health check. That'll be fine too. That way we won't get all these 404s. So not too concerned. Whoops, not too concerned with those. Here's the 400s. So we got a 400 the first time we tried it at 758, and again at 802. Both of these were 400s. Let's take a look at the 758, and now we can also see what took so long. So it took 46 seconds for this thing to come back. What was it doing during that initial time? It's hard to say. So yeah, it didn't start this get secret thing until later. That's weird. Yeah. And that was ongoing even after the request returned the 400. There's some strange asynchronous stuff going on. I'm going to have to look into that. But right here, we can see is our first error in time. But this one's okay. You can see here it's using a chained token credential. And so if you are if you're using this is accessing Key Vault from a node application. So if you're using the default credential, it's a chained token credential. It puts a whole bunch of things together that it tries in order. The very first one is environment credential get token. So if you set some environment variables, it will use those, and that one fails. I haven't set those environment variables. And then, yeah, that takes 3.9 seconds for it to fail. I should take that out of the chain. Save myself and my users that 3.9 seconds. Makes a lot of sense. And then we try the managed identity credential, and that's the one that I'm actually using. So I'm using Azure Managed Identity so that only this deployed application can access this Key Vault. That's the way to go. If there's any way you can use Managed Identity, that's the way to do it. So I'll rearrange this so that I'm just using Managed Identity. That's the way I've configured this application. Don't need to use the chain. And that will save us a little bit of time. But that's not what's causing the problem, because you see it falls down to Managed Identity. It gets the token, and everything is good. That is really weird. It's able to get the this Managed Identity right here at the beginning of the timeline, but then this continues off there. I don't understand why. So, in any case, this helps us to get our client secret, which means that coming in here, we were able to load Apple Authentication, and Apple Authentication had the client secret in there. But here is Janaga Postgres get client, and Janaga Postgres, the connection to the Postgres database, that is, which is right here, PGS. That's doing a select from the auth client, where this client ID is this value here. Somewhere in here, it doesn't actually show me the value, but one of these should have the value in it. Load Apple Auth. This, I think this right here is the value. This NJ8. Okay. Let's just take a look at my Monster Hotel configuration, and I've got the key ID is this, and NJB, sorry, that's not an 8, that's a B. That is my replicator identity. So it might be that I am using my replicator ID when I should be using my client ID. That might be what the problem is. Okay. Yeah, we'll try that out. So we're loading Apple Auth for the replicator, and then here we are going to the client table, and okay, we're trying to get client for KJI, right? So KJI is the client ID, right? Interesting. Okay. So it looks like we're doing those things correctly, but for some reason it's saying that I don't have that client ID in the database. Now, there is a back-end service that's running that populates this client table. Maybe that service failed and was not able to put that in there. So let's take a look at exceptions. This probably isn't the right one. The request URI contains an invalid name. This one was 7:46. That might be the right time. I don't know if that has anything to do with it. 7:46. Yeah, we were already streaming at that point. So you can see here we are in dev.janaga.com. We set up our session, and then we load some facts. That's probably rendering the repository or the replicator list. Here it's inserting into Apple Auth. So here it has set up the Apple Auth table, which we know worked. Here's key vaults, and for some reason I got an exception trying to access key vaults. Okay, so this exception might have gotten in the way of setting up the client table. That might be what the problem is. Okay, so I think I've narrowed it down to something to look for at the very least. Okay, so all of this stuff probably makes very little sense to you, but I recorded it for me. So I'm going to take a look at this exception right here and see why this key vault secret ID, the URI contains an invalid name. This right here. So I think I can already see it. Let me open this up in Notepad, and then we should be able to see what's going on. I know this is riveting stuff. Let's look at this strange bit of characters in Notepad. Look, it's got underscores as well as dashes. A key vault secret ID can only have alpha, number, and dash. No underscore, no other characters. So this is an invalid key ID. Along the way, we were supposed to convert this to a valid key ID. Put dashes in there. And when we did this, when we did the upload, let me go back to this walkthrough. There we go. Fill that in. Next right here, this upload. Let me rerun that upload and you can see what is going on. So I'm going to upload PVP. Boom. We are talking to Apple. Well, we're not actually talking to Apple. We're talking to the Apple endpoint on dev.janaga.com. So we're posting to keys/Apple. Here, save this stuff and give me back a key ID. And notice here is the key ID that I intended to get back. Ba-boom. That is not at all the same. Oh, okay. An OAuth key. Right. Versus an Apple key. Okay, so I did this with the Apple key ID. I replaced all of the underscores with dashes, so this one probably even started with an underscore, which is kind of funny. Don't often see that, but here I did not do the same thing with OAuth keys. Okay. So the reason that we're seeing OAuth keys in the key store is that we are using RSA to sign the token. That way, your application, if it chooses to, could use the public key in order to validate the token. Now, it doesn't have to, because it's going to use that token in order to log into the Replicator as a service, and the Replicator as a service is going to use the public key to validate the token. But I didn't want to keep you out of the loop if you wanted to do that validation, and certainly I didn't want to share a shared key using HMAC in order to do that validation, because you're shipping your application, and that key would leak, and then people would be able to forge tokens and log in as anybody they want, and that would be bad. So I think that's our smoking gun right there, this little underscore. I need to fix that, and then we will have it. All right. Good. Yeah, I'm glad that I went through all of that that craziness in order to figure out the problem. I don't know. Maybe that that helped with a little bit of troubleshooting thought, or maybe I doxed myself somewhere in there, and you can use that in order to attack me. I don't know. Let's see what happens. But yeah, we've got Replicator as a service, signing in with Apple. Pretty exciting stuff. I'm going to be able to get this fixed now, and then we will be on to setting up authorization and distribution rules, and then you can actually ship an app with the Replicator service. It's going to be pretty exciting. Yeah, so stay tuned for that. And until next week, I've been Michael L. Perry. We will talk again with Jan. See you then.